Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. I made a long introduction and was going to focus not so much on Kennedy today in a video, but then YouTube let me know that these hearings were taking place, the Kennedy hearings, the hearings on censorship. And that's epic. And I was already going to talk about Prejudice, and nothing shows more about Prejudice than the hearing. It's just great. So I want to get into that. Let me just show you a few clips of that, and then I'll talk a little bit more, and then we'll get into the introduction and then the other stuff.
On the third day of this administration, January 23rd, 2021, the White House sent an email to Twitter. The email said this: "Wanted to flag the below tweet, and I'm wondering if we can get moving on the process for having it removed ASAP," in all caps. That third day, what did that tweet say? Tweet from Mr. Kennedy said this: "Hank Aaron's tragic death is part of a wave of suspicious deaths among elderly closely following administration of the vaccine. He received the vaccine on January 5th to inspire other Black Americans to get the vaccine." Now, what's interesting about the email that the White House sent to Twitter is the subject line says, "Flagging Hank Aaron misinformation." Now, misinformation is when you don't have the facts right. You're saying things that aren't true. But when you look at Mr. Kennedy's tweet, there was nothing in there that was factually inaccurate. Hank Aaron, real person, great American, passed away after he got the vaccine, pointing out facts. And yet the White House on the third day was trying, actually 1:04 a.m. on January 23rd, 2021, 37 hours into the administration, they were trying to censor Mr. Kennedy. I find that interesting.
When I gave my speech, my announcement speech in Boston 2 months ago, YouTube, I talked about all those issues. I focused on grocery. I focused on the fact that working class people can no longer afford to live in this country. I talked about inflation, all the issues that deeply concern you, and that you've devoted your career to alleviating those issues. 5 minutes into my speech, when I was talking about Paul Revere, YouTube deplatformed me.
So those are excerpts from Jim Jordan's opening statement. I'll comment on that later. And also Kennedy's opening statement. There's a lot. I'm going to play that whole opening statement later on. And he says some things that are going to bum truthers out. There's a few things that come out in this thing that are going to bum truthers out, and I'm going to get into my opinion on that, his beliefs, right? But here I just want to talk about two things. You know, the beginning of the prejudice thing, which I addressed in the upcoming introduction, and I'm going to address it throughout the video. But mostly I want to talk about censorship, because I'm somebody, and you guys are all people, most of you, I assume, my regular viewers, we suffer from censorship. And I have said over the years that private companies can do what they want. If YouTube wants to censor me or censor us, it's their prerogative. They're a private company. Free speech does not apply to them in this context. But what they demonstrate here, and it's already a slam dunk, they don't need to have the rest of the hearing, is that there was collusion between the government and the FBI and the government, which are the same thing in many ways, and the social media giants. And they pressured, because these social media giants were making bank from truther videos, from so-called conspiracy theory videos. We all know it. They were making bank. They didn't want to get rid of them. They had to be pressured, even though the Democrats are going to say that these people like me and you bullied social media to carry our content, because the Democrats have nothing in this case, right? And again, I'm not a pro-Republican person, but the Democrats are, arguing on the side of, they're arguing against the Constitution, but also on the side of evil. And they're using all these evil tactics that they themselves whine about when they're talking about it. And we'll get into that, and I'll destroy it, and Kennedy's going to destroy this one woman in particular, who ends up being the sort of shill for this Democratic statement. They've just, left her hanging out to dry when I think she must know that what she's saying is complete BS. And they bring in race baiting and, woke consciousness and accuse Kennedy of being anti-Semitic. They try to censor him right off the bat and not allow him to testify. And, that's in a hearing about censorship, which several people say here, including Kennedy himself. But censorship in this way, when the government is colluding and one party is colluding, and one party has the ability to censor all the information that benefits the other party, you're rigging the system, and then all these other arguments about election denial and things like that go out the window because you're rigging the elections, because social media is everything in the electoral process. And they did this with the the Hunter Biden tapes. That's the other parts. Kennedy and the Hunter Biden tapes are the most talked about things here. But this affects us, right? I don't get into identity politics, like what Tucker Carlson calls identity politics, something that's been used. But the Republicans used identity politics and still do. And people have their own personal prejudices. And, there's going to be a point where RFK Jr. talks about how he's a very big supporter of Israel because they accused him of being anti-Semitic, and that's going to bum out some truthers. But I don't care about your people's superficial demographics, what you identify, your race, your other things, right? I just don't care about it. It's uninteresting to me. We all have our prejudices or whatever stereotypes we believe in, subconscious things, all that stuff. And that's important to the woke people. It's important the right wing in different ways. People want to put people in boxes and things like that. But what I focus mostly on this YouTube channel is about beliefs, right? And, people going to war over beliefs and people trying to control other people's beliefs. But most of us are at war within ourselves. For example, I know that this system is demonic, evil, and can't be fixed, which I talk about in the introduction. Like, I know it. Like, I've seen it. It's no doubt in my mind. And it's bad, and it's making the world worse. It's making people worse. And the sooner it ends, the better for everybody. On a soul level, on what's right. It's just right for this system to die. It's right for this system to disappear. The system is, it's a cancer that's just going to, the longer it's left going, it's going to do more and more damage. But on an egotistical level, I don't want that to happen because I'm older. I mean, we all have our whatever. We're all dependent on the system. And my wife and I are building a farm, and, we have the ability to adjust. We are in better position than other people to adjust mentally and spiritually and all these things. And, I know it's the right thing. And, I mean, it'll still come as a shock, but we have some level of being a pocket of the future, which is preparing to live now as everyone will live in the future. I think I talk about that in the introduction. But, we have some movement in this area. And in some ways, I might like it a lot, right? And yet, on an egotistical level, I'm not into the system collapsing. Like, there's some apprehension and, some gratitude to all the evil people in the intelligence community and the government and the corporations that are keeping this system going long after it should have collapsed. It should have collapsed years ago. It's already dead and it's a walking corpse, and they're just propping it up with deception and more evil. It's a zombie system. It's a ghoulish system. It's already dead, but it's being propped up by nefarious means. And some part of me is, happy with the people who are engaging in this evil to keep the system going, right? So it's a contradiction, and we all have that inside ourselves. And so I don't really care about beliefs, right? I don't really care that much about all these things. But, certainly the censorship affects me. There's not too many things that affect me directly, but censorship affects me and all of you on a daily basis. And, this is a good hearing to get that out there. And you can see about the ways, the manipulative, evil ways the Democrats are engaged in to keep that, dialogue going. But with that, I had a great comment yesterday. And the person writes this, you're just completely wrong about much of what you say, in my opinion. The person's not going to give us anything specific. So don't you worry about that. They say, you're just completely wrong about much of what you say, in my opinion. I've been occasionally watching your videos for years. I've always had a hard time figuring out what you're trying to say. So how do you know what I'm completely wrong, right? I'm going to read the whole thing. Let me read the whole thing, and then we'll laugh about it, and I'll comment on it. I always had a hard time figuring out what you were trying to say. I agree with what you're saying at times, I think, but then the next point I find in what you're saying doesn't make any sense. Then you come out with a statement that I know is completely wrong. So that I may understand, I would like to ask you to consider far-right truther. I would ask you you consider far-right period truther period anon period / QAnon. Are they the same thing to you, or are all in the same category? How about conservatives? Are they the middle right? This is RFK sister turns on him. NSA agent Tim Ballard laughingly claims he doesn't know what QAnon is. And this is important to what we're going to discuss here. So instead of saying that, I'm completely wrong, why don't you admit that I'm beyond you, like in this area? Like I know more in some way. Because something's drawing you to my channel, right? Are you asking me for more IQ points? Like, well, what are you doing? Like, this isn't my problem. Everything that you said here is not my problem. Because you're asking me to explain to you in some remedial way, and you're not even giving specifics about what you don't understand. And I'm not going to, because I don't make videos for stupid people. I don't make videos for people who can't comprehend what I'm doing here. Or at least, are confused. Like, you're confused and you're blaming it on me and not your lack of perception, your lack of consciousness. You say my videos confuse you, and maybe you should go to somebody who doesn't confuse you. But either way, don't bother me with it, because it's not my problem. Why dump this on me? Like, this is the selfishness people have. You're dumping your confusion of what I'm saying, right? Like, it's like I made content and you don't understand it. You're saying I'm completely wrong, but then you say you don't understand it. And then you want me to what? Explain it to you? Or what are you looking for here? There's no clear, you're not giving me anything that you're looking for. And even if you did, I wouldn't give it to you, because I'm not, about that, right? And this is the problem people have. You got to recognize when somebody's beyond you. If you ever see this scene in the movie of the Fellowship of the Ring, and I think it comes directly from the book, The Lord of the Rings. It's the end of the movie, and Gandalf has to fight the Balrog, who is this ancient beast. It's got horns, looks like a devil, has a cosmic whip. It's a huge, powerful animal that's basically on fire. Whatever, I don't know. you can see the thing for yourself. And Gandalf said, "Fly you." Gandalf says this. He says this to his comrades, his people on his team. This enemy is beyond you. Otherwise, meaning you can do nothing to hurt this enemy. You're just going to get in my way. Get out of my way. And so there are things that are beyond you. There are things that, that people have elevated to a certain level. And if you see people who are really good at something that's highly competitive, that they have developed skills that most people can't even comprehend. You can see acrobats and things. People do crazy stuff and, gymnastics and things like that the average person couldn't even imagine doing, right? Probably couldn't even do, no matter how much training and effort they put into it on the athletic field. And then there's other levels of excellence, musicians, things, and people get really good at something. The more they do it, the more they practice at it. And I'm really good at this. I am, an expert in what I do here. And I'm not saying that to brag. It's just facts, right? And whether you see it or not, it's there. And part of that is because I have lived a lot of lives. I had lives where I was an Asuric king, a demonic king in India. I'm pretty much sure that happened. And, when I look at these putzes who are doing things that I used to do in some previous existence, that's why I mock them for, doing something that I know is going to lead to a failed. It's, something that, led me astray in the past, right? And I've evolved out of it, like in terms of wanting power and wanting material influence and things. And some of the things that they're doing are things that I possibly created, like bad things in the past. Do you understand this? And so that's why I have insight into what they do. But also I've had lives as a spiritual person, a saintly person. And so I have had that experience, and it's there amongst many other experiences. And you can hear it in my, coming from a soul level. On a material level, I'm pretty incompetent. Like in this life, I'm not really good at anything. My work is kind of sloppy. I'm an okay farmer. I'm an okay cook. I'm dyslexic, and, I'm absent-minded, and I don't really care about things. I cook most of the meals here. I'm an okay cook. I'm all right. Good tasting meals, nothing sensational in terms of, like, it's not like stuff I would serve at a dinner party, but if I did, people would probably like the food. My wife likes the food, and my kids do. Whatever. But for example, I often now have gotten to the habit of leaving the drawers open when I cook something or I'm in the kitchen. And my wife has pleaded with me. My wife is not a nagger. She is a delightful person to be around, and she's very happy with me. But, she has to clean up the drawers that I will inevitably spill stuff into. We go out to dinner, and I would get these kind of cheap button shirts. I usually wear a T-shirt, and I get like 2 for $10 or something. And with the idea that somehow I'd ruin the shirt by the end of the meal, right? Like there's just, and I'm not trying to be messy, and even when I'm trying to be careful, I seem to just make a mess, right? So it's just something I do. And even though I want to please my wife, I'm not trying to aggravate her, I can't remember to close the drawers. So now I've, done other things, like I try to move stuff so when I'm preparing food that I'm not over a drawer or whatever. There's things that will stay open, like silverware drawers. But to understand this, I'm incompetent in lots of things. And I was an incompetent person before doing Saj Marg, right? But I'm good at this. And, even when I was good at something like basketball, I was very streaky. I was only, good some of the time. Like I would get hot, right, is what they would call it, right? I'd hit a lot of shots. And some days I could hit, lots of shots. Some days I wouldn't hit anything. And it was just how I was. But I'm very consistent in what I do here. Very clear. There's an energy here. It's congruent with my soul. I have a wealth of past life experience and spiritual upliftment from the Saj Marg system. And my consciousness is like expanding in this way through my meditative practice. And I understand things at a completely different level than most of the people that you watch and most of the people that you will ever talk to. In fact, it's unique in some ways because of the uniqueness of my experience, the dyslexia, the Saj Marg aspect, and some of the other things that I've talked about. And so I'm good at what I'm doing. And analyzing these things, I can get things wrong. I can, misinterpret something, but it's very seldom. And it comes from a completely different perspective because I'm not like freaked out or angry or emotional about what I'm talking about here. Because I've, reconciled the truth that we all have to face, that this system needs to collapse, but we don't want it to. And that's where we are. We're dependent on the system, 100% dependent on a system that we all, know should collapse, but don't really want it to. And that's, I've accepted it. And so I'm at peace with it. And so instead of, like, you can go to listen to some dumbasses who agree with you and that you can understand, and that's fine. Like, that's whatever it is. But if you don't have the level of intelligence or consciousness to be here, then don't be here. But either way, keep me out of it. It's not my problem. Like, I'm not, this is what I do, and I present it, and, it is whatever it is. I don't know how great it is or how lame it is or whatever. But this is what I do. I present it. I throw it out there. I only care about it a little bit. Like I care about, when I'm talking about it, like I'm interested. I want to say I'm not interested. I am. But, overall, it's not going to, it is what it is. It might help you, figure things out and clear things up for you, because most people here that come here aren't clear about something. And that's why you're here. You're not clear about what's going on or what you should do. And maybe through my videos, at least some people have gained clarity. And I'm very clear about what I'm supposed to do and what's going to happen. And with that, let's get into the introduction here. Greetings, brothers and sisters. So I got a couple of kind of bizarre stories to get to first. And I want to do an introduction narrative and address some of this stuff. I want to talk about all this that I'm going to show you here. And then I'm going to come back in with Fran Drescher and the writer's strike, some good comedy stuff today. But the American military spends $80 million, $84 million on Viagra and other pills, right? And that is a stunning story in itself here from the BBC. And so I want to get into that in just a moment. Let's come back to that. Apparently, there is this new genre of videos on TikTok, and it's people like acting like NPCs. And my wife and I watched something. She sent me this, and it used to have 3 other videos with it. It's a tweet, but they got rid of the other 2 videos for some reason. But she had looked them up to find the videos for me because I want to use it today. And she found a video that was kind of hilarious of a guy who was acting like an NPC at McDonald's. And that was a little bit different than this. So that, was kind of entertaining. It was entertaining. This is not. This is weird. And so this person's acting like an NPC and is reacting to the emojis and things that people are, especially cookies, is a big one apparently. And let's just watch it here.
Marshmallow. Crunchy corn, yum! Kitty paws. Pumpkin, yum!
How spicy.
Ice cream, yum!
So, I guess she's not the cookie girl. There's another one with cookies, but it's so weird, right? It's like the breakdown of civilization has, and just the degradation hits levels that you never think it would.
Kitty paws. Ice cream, yum! Once we get to 350, I'll leave, I promise. Stinky swear.
How spicy.
Hot dog, yum!
Okay, so there's another one here.
Gang gang. Ice cream so good, thank you, Jackie. Gang gang, gang gang, gang gang. Oh, special. Gang gang, rah, rah, rah. Gang gang, gang gang. Balloon. Gang gang, gang gang. That was good. Lemonade. Hee-haw, yes. You got me feeling like a cowgirl. Let me write it, huh? Hee-haw, yes. You got me feeling like a cowgirl. Let me write it, huh? Slay, huh? Slay, huh?
Okay, so that's what's happening here. Let me switch over to the voiceover here. Okay, so what I want to talk about here, I'll get into this in a moment, is prejudice. But I want to just say this thing about the military and Viagra. Like, what does that say to the Russian and the Chinese military that America spends $84 million, the American military spends $84 million on dick pills? Like, what's that all about? And there's a connection to the heart. Viagra was originally a heart medication, right? And it had this side effect because it helped with blood circulation. There's things like watermelon and other natural, that have a more subtle effect like this. Watermelon is good for circulation, but also for blood flow. Not just the heart. It's also good for the heart and these other, aspects. And there's natural things out there that'll help boost testosterone and other things. But the fact that military is mostly young men and young people, and they're spending. I mean, why are they spending any money on Viagra? Like, where does that? How does that? Where does that Viagra go? Like, who takes it? Who's getting it? And why does the military have a budget for these, dick pills or whatever? And then these NPCs, like, I mean, everything gets so degraded on the internet, and it's becoming less and less human and less the ability to, an NPC, everything's pre-programmed. There's no decision you can make on your own. Like, you're automated, like you're completely regimented. There's no sense of you being able to choose out of your existence. And, I want to talk about that a little bit with Prejudice. I watched this great movie called White Tiger the last couple of days. It took me 2 days to finish it. And, there's 3 movies, Indian movies I like. One's called Lagan, the other one's The Lunchbox. I talk about this more, 113th version of the Journey series. So there's one, the 112th is going to be released soon, and then I'm starting on the 113th. So I'm going to talk about that more in that. But it's about the Indian caste system and, locking in and just doing what society expects you to do. And that, is much more prevalent in other countries. But in terms of prejudice, we all have it. Like, prejudice is, like, people talk about racism, they talk about homophobia. But really what it is prejudice. People prejudge. And we put different people or different groups in different categories. And some of those categories are realistic. Some of those things are exaggerations. But everything's about prejudice in our society. Like, we're all prejudiced against people in the truth community. They've created this profile that we know isn't accurate because it's right-wing, crazy Alex Jones, QB-type truthers. And that makes up a small minority, and those aren't even really truthers. They're not really truth people. They're usually people who don't have the ability for abstract thought and, very limited in their consciousness. They don't have critical thinking skills. But I wanted to talk about, like, differential diagnosis. When I worked as a counselor years and years ago, and, I have a master's degree in counseling, and I learned to use a DSM-5. They also have this in medical, in the medical communities. You have similar conditions, psychological conditions, that have similar symptoms or have exactly, some of the exact same symptoms. There's maybe 5 or 6 different diagnoses, maybe even more, that have alternate personalities as part of the symptoms. Schizophrenia, schizotypal, the identity disorder, which is, what used to be multiple personality disorder. And so when you're doing a diagnosis and a person exhibits some of these symptoms, you have to differentiate between one condition and another. And so there are these things, these differential diagnosis keys that you look for, that one thing exists in one condition and one in another. And it's very, even the psychological diagnoses themselves are a little whack, they're not clean. But you have to be able to differentiate in life, right? And people who are binary boops, boop, people who are left, right, liberal, Democrat, liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican, on, off, they can't do this kind of thing. They don't have the ability for differential diagnosis. They just have to put everything in categories. They have to say, this category is this category is that, right? And so this movie, The White Tiger, I don't like Indian movies. I don't like Bollywood movies. But I like these 3 movies. There's 3 of my favorite movies that I've watched, right? But, they're genre-based movies. There are movies that are in genres, like the Green Book is one of those movies. Like I like tears in my eyes. Like I got, it's a movie about prejudice. It's about a gay black dude and like an Italian gangster who has to be his, he drives the guy who plays Aragon in Lord of the Rings, and that other guy, Masala, whatever his name is. Great actors. These are like phenomenal actors. And it is a masterpiece of a movie. My wife and I watched it. And it got the idea of prejudice across without being all fake woke and, shove it in your face in some, forceful way, just like subtly done. And there's movies like that. Another movie I like is Arrival, which is about a strong female, character, but it isn't that she's kicking ass or whatever. Like these are some I've seen Arrival like 3 or 4 times. They're good movies that are usually, it's a science fiction movie, but it's a sort of a, it's a drama. These are dramas. I don't like dramas and things like that, right? And so there's these different types of movies. Going back to this idea of, I have some comments to get to. I don't know if I'll get to. I won't get to it here. Maybe at the end of the video, or maybe tomorrow on my other channel. But anyways, going back to this, The Sound of Freedom. There are patriotic movies that I like. There are movies that are action movies that are targeted towards this audience, where they wave the flag in your face. Let's say I'm watching a movie about the CIA, and they come in with just like CIA or MI6 or something like that, spy movie. I like spy stuff or TV show. And they come in right off the bat and they just go with the mainstream narrative, right? Like these to do with the big event in 2001, for example. And they're just selling the mainstream narrative, and it's just, there's no sense of another story, or it's just boilerplate, just, template stuff coming from the CIA and their perspective. And there's no sense that the CIA has, had issues in the past with abuse and human rights issues and deception and psychological operations and all this stuff, right? When you're watching that kind of thing, I just can't even, it's anti-truther stuff. It's just slamming in our face the very, like the difference between that and say Waco, which, categorizes the patriot movement in a way that it links them to Waco and these other, sort of domestic terrorist type of genre. But it also talks about how the FBI and the ATF botched Waco. Like it's a more balanced narrative, right? Where it's like nuanced. It isn't just like one side or one, coming from the Republican perspective or the Democrat, and or any of these other groups. And so a good movie does that. Like it gets into the complexity of whatever you're dealing with, right? The movie Argo is another example. The Ben Affleck movie, I think it won Best Picture that year. But it's about a CIA agent that busts out some of the hostages, or some of these diplomats who escaped the embassy when it was stormed in Iran. But it starts off with the Operation Ajax and how America basically destroyed Iran. So it's not like all pro-American, like it is. The Iranians are clearly the villains in this movie, and the CIA guy and the people getting these hostages out are the heroes. But it's not just this black and white thing that they're evil, because they make it clear that America, with the Operation Ajax, when they got rid of Mossadegh, the Iranian, the democratically elected, the Viagra story, the democratically elected president of Iran, and now they destroyed it. Like America and CIA completely effed Iran. Like Iran is messed up because of America. Like we did that to that country. And they mentioned that, like they start off with that. And so if you understand that there's nuances and there's just not black and white. And so one version of this, I'm going to cover the Jason Aldean thing probably tomorrow on my other channel. It's the guy wrote a song called Small Town, or you won't get away with that in a small town, whatever the name of the song is. And it sucks. The song sucks. I don't like the song. I'm not a big fan of country music, but I agree with him. It's similar to the Sound of Freedom. And what's the difference? Like, why do I dislike the Sound of Freedom and condemning the Sound of Freedom as a scam and whatever? And this other thing that's happening, I have a different opinion. Well, and I don't like the song, and I don't know anything about Jason Aldean or any of these things, right? So what's the difference? Well, the difference is, like they're saying, for example, that it's a pro-lynching song. And it's not. Like, there's no mention of lynching. There's no any of these things. And there's no different. What it is like Antifa and BLM and these other groups, and him saying you wouldn't get away with this in a small town, which is, a point of view, which, again, is coming from the right-wing conservatives and the patriots. But, a lot of us understand this point of view and agree with it on some level. What they're doing in cities, the Hollywood morality, woke left agenda madness is, something that they're doing in cities. And the majority of people don't agree with it. The majority of people aren't on board, but are going along with one way or another, or they make it sound like the majority of people are pushing this movement, and they're not. And people just can't, differentiate and figure that out, right? And so it's a different sort of conflict where Jason Aldean and these, whatever's going on with that are being attacked by the woke social media people and people like Sheryl Crow and some other, I'll cover this tomorrow on my other channel probably. And like, that's one thing, right? Whereas the Sound of Freedom exaggerating the attacks from the left media. The one thing the left media wants to attack, and it's a mainstream story. The other thing is lesser. It's, there's been a few things said about it in the left media, and those things are mostly being publicized by the Sound of Freedom propaganda machine. And so, I want to talk about this idea, this differential diagnosis and prejudice to do with RFK Kennedy. Now, I made a video about how JFK had a weird relationship with a gay friend, an openly gay friend. They wore the same bathing suits together, like like weird, and it seemed like they had some sort of possible sexual relationship, or they had long-term friendship, and the whole Kennedy clan, and they're part of the elite, whatever it is. But of course, two of them were murdered, so it's a little bit different, right? They pissed off the what would be considered the deep state by the Cubies. And so, there's that. But again, I've not been a pro-Kennedy person. My mom was, whatever. My mom and, family were Democrats. Probably my sister was a hippie. They were upset by the Kennedy murder. I was, just born. I was born in 1964. He was murdered in 63. So, I grew up with it, but like I was young. And, I don't know the effects it had on the country and all these things. And military-industrial complex, clearly the CIA, based in what RFK is saying, had a part in it. But I made it clear over and over again I would probably never vote again, and that the system can't be fixed. More importantly, even if there was a great candidate, that the system can't be fixed and really shouldn't be fixed. It's a bad system. It's run its course, and it's as good as it is materially and the benefits that there are in the system. It's fundamentally demonic because it's a debt-based system, and it's based in materialism, and it leaves God out and the natural essence of the human being. It's anti-nature. It's anti-God. It is, violates multiple spiritual laws and principles, and it's taking us all in the wrong direction. We're getting weaker and stupider and just, disconnected from everything natural and divine in us. And, it's hurting us. It's, the system is, the evaluation of a system is how it affects people. Are the people getting better? We're the product of the system. We're the outcome, right? Or the byproduct, or whatever you want to call it. Well, the product. And that we are, getting worse. There's no evaluation where you can say, there's no evaluation you could set up and to say that people are getting better. Americans maybe specifically, but globally. People are getting weaker and stupider and more selfish, more entitled. Like, all the bad things are becoming more and more prevalent. All the good things are going away. And so that kind of system should be destroyed. There's no place for that system on a global basis, because it's going in the wrong direction. It's taking us in the wrong direction. And so I've made my views on this perfectly clear, right? And so why am I saying that I would vote for RFK? It seems counter to everything that I say here on this channel. And the reason is because he is, when you hear him talk, he's a reasonable person. And whether I agree with, there's a fundamental disagreement between me and him where he thinks the country can be saved, and I know it can, right? Like I know it can never be divinized. It can never be made, what it should be. You can't rearrange the system based in the debt-based economic system. You'd have to change everything about the system. And you can't save it. You can't change it. And so, it's pointless to vote for somebody when there's no chance of it being fixed, right? But the reason I'd vote for him is that it's the right thing to do. And he represents our beliefs to some extent, like our point of view as he's a genuine truther if you hear him talk. And whether you think he's duping people, it's not the truther. There's no reason for him to do this, right? Like he could be the president, maybe not this time with Biden if he ran as a traditional Democrat, just based on the Kennedy name. And, he's smart and he's good at, he's a good candidate. The only reason for him to be a truther is that he believes in what he's saying. Now, we might not all agree on the same ideas as truther because we don't agree with each other and, oftentimes with ourselves, as I say, we change and evolve in these things. But it's just the right thing to do because I would hire him as president. If someone said, hey, you're in charge of hiring the president, RFK is somebody that I would hire. Maybe someone like Cynthia McKinney who stood up to Rumsfeld, like that would probably be a good ticket if he was going to pick somebody for VP. Like she would probably be a good, she was, right before the big event, right after the big event in the day before the big event in 2001, the Pentagon comes out, Rumsfeld said they lost like $9 trillion. And Cynthia McKinney was the only one who sort of confronted these guys. It's epic. You can find the video on YouTube and other things that she said and stood for. So there are people like that, right, who represent us as a group. Like not, that we share everything. Like Trump is a wannabe truther. Like he's a fake truther. And, people who are QBs are fake truthers themselves, so he represents them because they're not real truthers and neither is he. And being a truther isn't really a thing. It's just this movement that's happened, that there's social media, and there's been this idea of, some of these narratives starting with the Federal Reserve and then, things my brother covered on AM radio show years and years ago and other, sort of OG people in this movement that came out of like the Vietnam War and, in some extent the hippie movement and, an opening up of this idea of that the official story, the so-called true story that we get, the historical story, is just full of lies and deception and manipulation, right? But like I said with Joe Biden, Democrats would lie to you about this, but if they were being honest, they'd say, if you ask them, would you want Joe Biden driving your kid's school bus? No rational person would say yes. The guy is, not capable of driving a school bus. So how is he going to run the country? So you wouldn't hire him. And you wouldn't hire Trump, if you were being honest, if you really evaluate him as a person because of his, deceptive nature. Like we know enough. Like I wouldn't hire Joe Biden or Trump to do anything. I would not put that. They would just be a nightmare. There are people who I know about. Like I wouldn't hire my ex. I wouldn't hire, there's various people. I wouldn't hire Dodgy from the Heartfulness organization. You guys who know about that stuff that I've talked about in the Journey series. There's people I know enough about. And I know that you put them in any position and they're going to screw it up. They're going to mess it up. They're just toxic people that suck at things. Like there's no good thing unless you were hiring them to be president of China or your enemy or something. Like you wanted to, like you some football team you hated and you wanted them to, destroy the franchise or whatever. But these are toxic people that everything that they touch, like Trump, everything about Trump is surrounded in conflict and drama and debt and failure. I mean, you look at Trump's life, he's gone bankrupt twice and multiple marriages and good time old friends. People are loyal to him. He turns on and, even though they did nothing to him and just, he's a toxic person. And Joe Biden, we know about everything to do with him, right? His family, his son, his all this stuff. They're horrible people. They turn something good into something bad. They're not capable of making America great again because that's not what they do. They're like destructive in their nature. And so I would never hire them. But somebody like Kennedy, or Kennedy himself, not somebody like him, I could see him being a good president because I trust his decision making, like based in just hearing him talk and the way his mental process works, and he's transparent about it. These other candidates, they're just playing a character, right? Whereas Kennedy is authentic, and you get a sense of the way he does something, right? The way he approaches something. Like he said, the Jordan, I think Peterson, Jordan, somebody. He was doing an interview with Lex Friedman, which took my wife and I have been listening to it over like a long period of time. It's been, but towards the end of it, he said that I think it's Jordan somebody. I don't know who it was. I heard a little bit of clip of that interview, but Kennedy said that guy was trying to get him to bash the right, and I mean bash the left, and he had other people trying to get him to denounce Trump and Alex Jones and all these other people. There's various, interviews he's done where the people had an agenda and wanted him to denounce somebody. Remember, like they were always trying to get Trump to denounce this group or that group. And Kennedy said, I'm not going to do any of that. I'm not here to be divisive, right? I'm here to unite. It's the only way that you could save the country or whatever. And I'm not here to unite personally. I'm not a uniter. Like I'm not, talking about going back to the Sound of Freedom. Like I don't believe that any of this stuff can fix or save the kids or save any of these things. It can't be done. It's, the whole nature of the system is abusive. But what I do here is I present a way to cope and transcend and move through the collapse and the apocalypse. That's what pockets of future are. People living now like everyone's going to have to live in the future. Learning to create something that can sustain the collapse and then be there on the other side and build a better world. And it starts with connecting to divinity, or the Sajmark meditation, which is the gift from God to help people facilitate a deeper relationship with God, and then all the other things that go with it, right? Learning to reclaim village-based life, tribal type of life, but also retain some of the good knowledge, the sophisticated knowledge, scientific knowledge and things that we have now. That we retain the good things of our old system, and that we create a new system based in our connection to the divine. And for all of this to happen, the old system has to collapse. The system we're 100% dependent on. So that's, my view. So I'm not a uniter. Like I'm not here to fix something or to change something in the system itself. I'm here to, help people come to terms with the crappiness of our current system and help to build something better in the future. And it's, a long-term plan. It will take hundreds of years for the system to collapse and then to build something better. But it's, we need to be doing it now. We need to start the process now. We have to, put the idea of saving the system behind us and, work towards building something better, and connecting to God internally is the first step. And so that's what I do here. Quite different than most people in the truth community, and certainly different from Kennedy and all these others, other political people and all this stuff. But I would hire Kennedy as president. Like I would just, right now I would say he would be as good a reflection of what I believe a president should be, because you can see his decision-making process. He expresses his internal world. He's much more transparent as a person. And so that's why I have endorsed this idea of voting for him, whether he gets elected or not. It's because in some ways it could be pointless, but at least endorsing, him as the kind of candidate that we need, the kind of politician that you would need in the future, somebody who is honest and transparent and isn't, manipulating people and pretending to be like them just to get their support and then turning on them because they're really part of a bigger club and all of it, right? So you guys can evaluate that for yourself. When you hear him talk, you listen to the interviews. He's a reasonable person. I would trust his decision making, right? Like he might make mistakes, but they would come from a sincere place, not some, puppet or just someone who's, why vote for someone when it's not even the real power behind the throne? And the other part would be the entertainment value, because Kennedy is a good debater. And, if JoJo, I mean, we'll see how it all plays out. But his being able to express some of these narratives, right? Some of the things going on here. And, the difference in what the mainstream people believe and what the official story says and what he says. And he says he's litigated these things. Like he sued Fauci and won. Like Fauci had to disclose something, then give him information, which was providing him, whatever data that Fauci was claiming he had, but he didn't, right? And they were avoiding debating him, right? And so, I'd like to see that happen, right? Just for entertainment value and things like this. Because, they claim to have receipts, and he claims to have receipts, but he said, when you litigate things, you have to become an expert in them. Because you can't put out stuff that can be debunked or can be, destroyed in court by experts, like, other experts on the other side, based in scientific data and research. But in all that, my energy goes into my particular, assignment, whatever I believe that to be. My divine assignment. It's not to fix or save the country. It's not to fix and save the system. It's not to bring people together. It's not to even build community and, all of these things. It's just to disseminate, what I see in front of me, what I believe is going to happen, and what the solution is to that. And, I'm not a uniter. Like I'm not I'm a divisive person in various ways. I say stuff to, I push people away. I say things that hurt people's feelings. I can be blunt, whatever. And, I'm not like the things that I'm saying about the Sound of Freedom, it's a divisive movie, and it's something where it's not going to bring people together and end in the result that the people who are in favor of the movie want to see, end child trafficking, right? But I don't have I'm not trying to bring people together. I'm not trying to reach out to the left or the right or any demographic, right? Like people have to, suffer through things that I'm going to say that are going to piss them off. Like that's the price you have to pay here, which I talked about in another video, my last video, I think on my other channel. You're going to have to suffer through that. You're going to have to absorb the pit to your ego that you're inevitably going to get when you watch my content. I'm not here to sugarcoat things or, appease people's egos or whatever. Like I don't have the, energy. I could do that, but I don't, there's so many different demographics of people that come across my stuff and the different points of view. And I just can't, just tiptoe around all of them because I'm just, lazy and I'm not into it. But like, I'm not doing what, I'm saying that the Sound of Freedom is, I'm doing the same thing. It's a divisive, it's only going to appeal. I'm not reaching out to the sheeple. I'm not here for those demographics. But Kennedy is, trying to work with everybody because that's what you'd have to do to solve the problem. And the people on the right aren't doing that. And you can say it's, the liberals are just horrible. We can never work with them. All right, yeah, then just admit that the country's broken because division is what is going to destroy this country. That's why they're pushing for it. The powers that be are pushing for division. That's why there's all these conflicts. And, the people on the left seem worse. They're more, I'm more inclined to agree with people on the right at this point, even though I was never a conservative and I grew up as a liberal, liberal Democrat family. The people on the left have the power and they're worse and they're, pushing a bizarre, satanic agenda. But the people on the right have sucked for years and they're as big a part of the problem. And you have to ascend from both. You have to ascend from these boxes that they've put you in. And you have to reach another level of consciousness to survive this thing. As long as you're a binary person, you're screwed. And the, call of freedom or the Sound of Freedom is a binary movie. It's for binary people, left, right, right. Liberal, Democrat, on, off. It's for binary people, and I don't make videos for binary people. You either have to, expand and jump out of your binary consciousness, or you have to go somewhere else. Like that's, Anyways, let's move on to the other stuff here. Okay, so I want to cover the Kennedy hearing here. This is about social media and censorship. It has nothing to do with Kennedy. But this guy comes out and he just blasts the Biden administration, and just unbelievable how bad that they're getting exposed here. Nothing's going to happen, but it's kind of funny. And let me just start here. I'm going to play a little bit. I want to cover this probably more in a couple days after this is fully over. But this is the first part here.
On the third day of this administration, January 23rd, 2021, the White House sent an email to Twitter. The email said this: wanted to flag the below tweet, and I'm wondering if we can get moving on the process for having it removed ASAP, in all caps. That third day, what did that tweet say? Tweet from Mr. Kennedy said this: Hank Aaron's tragic death is part of a wave of suspicious deaths among elderly closely following administration of the vaccine. He received the vaccine on January 5th to inspire other Black Americans to get the vaccine. Now, what's interesting about the email that the White House sent to Twitter is the subject line says, flagging Hank Aaron misinformation. Now, misinformation is when you don't have the facts right. You're saying things that aren't true. But when you look at Mr. Kennedy's tweet, there was nothing in there that was factually inaccurate. Hank Aaron, real person, great American, passed away after he got the vaccine, pointing out facts. And yet the White House on the third day was trying, actually 1:04 a.m. on January 23rd, 2021, 37 hours into the administration, they were trying to censor Mr. Kennedy. I find that interesting. The irony here.
Okay, so I'm going to go in. I'm just going to do a short version of this, right? Because it's long and I want to watch the whole thing and whatever. I've only watched parts of it, and it's still going on now. But they're guilty, right? Like, the Biden administration called something that wasn't misinformation, and they told a private company to censor something that had political ramifications because Biden is now running against Kennedy, amongst other things, right? All the stuff to do with Big Pharma and all the shill money, all this stuff. And so the other part of this is Hunter Biden's laptop, which they knew about. The FBI told them that it was confirmed that it was Hunter Biden's laptop in December 2019. I'm not going to cover the Hunter Biden. My microphone had batteries died just right there. So now I have all the clips that I'll do a clip and then I'll do a commentary. And the rest of this thing's going to be fresh. I'm in the editing session. I've done the pre-introduction and, it's been a kind of a confusing day. But anyways, I'm not going to cover the Hunter Biden thing here. But there is testimony in several places in this hearing where the FBI acknowledged that the Hunter Biden laptop was legitimate to various, whatever it is, publications, various people. And the stories were censored anyway. So they rigged the election, right? All these people knew it was true, knew it was a bombshell. They should have taken Joe Biden out. The Democratic Party should have said, all right, this is a nightmare. We can't run this guy. He's corrupt. His son's a mess. This is a scandal. I mean, if they were going to, what did they know? See, this is stuff Kennedy won't address or get into, but they had to know that they had to hide Jojo Magoo, one, because he had dementia, and two, because of all these issues. And so they needed COVID, and they got it, right? I mean, without COVID, Jojo Magoo wouldn't have won the presidency. And with the admission of his laptop, the Hunter Biden laptop, there's no way he would have gotten enough votes because, people were like didn't know anything about him. The campaign was all focused on Trump. And so all you heard about in 2019 and 2020 was Trump. And Joe Biden was just a Trump alternative. But if Biden was, made to, there was scrutiny for him about his mental health, about his scandals, about his son, about the corruption, then people would have been like, well, he isn't any better than Trump. And so he would have had no chance of winning. And so that's rigging the election. That's, fraudulent. We already knew that. And it was collusion between the FBI and the government and social media. And social media was forced to not publish these bombshell stories, and the mainstream media wasn't talking about them either. And so think about all what that implies, a complete corruption and breakdown of the system on new levels that we hadn't seen before. There was always some of this, but never like this on this level because of social media and the loss of control. This is always about control. That's why I call them the controllers. And so, all right, that's the first part. But let's get into these other things here.
Now, many of my Republican colleagues across the dais will rush to cover that they have Mr. Kennedy here because they want to protect his free speech, that they do not believe in American censorship. This is not the kind of free speech that I know of, the free speech that is protected by the Constitution's First Amendment. But free speech is not an absolute. The Supreme Court has stated that. And others' free speech that is allowed.
Okay, so this is Stacey Plaskett, and she is a representative from the Virgin Islands, where I lived in St. Thomas, Virgin Islands, for about, I would say, under a half a year. And it was after a hurricane, and the corruption and it's a bad place. Obviously beautiful, tropical island, but just it's an absolute mess. And this is back then. I'm sure it's much worse now. But she is somebody who received money from Pfizer, as did Pfizer gave $800,000 in legal contributions and who knows what other kind of ways, sideways contributions. And that's just one company. I didn't look up the other companies. But they gave about $400,000 to both Democrats and Republicans. And so all these people here are taking money from pharmaceutical companies. And as you'll see with Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who makes an appearance, I was kind of surprised at how she's even more ghoulish now than she was before. And it's a mess, right? The whole thing's a mess. But they tried to stop Kennedy from testifying on a committee about censorship because she's saying Kennedy's speech is the equivalent of yelling fire in a crowded theater. And it's clearly not, right? That's just ridiculous. That's just goofy. Like, it's not even close to that. There's no danger. And that's what they've said all along. What they're saying is you and I are a danger to America. We'll get into this. Let her, we'll get into when she starts hammering all of us and, all the things that she says.
Hateful, abusive rhetoric does not need to be promoted in the halls of the people's house. This Republican charge of free speech is being used by Republican members to promote quasi-science, things such as the replacement theory that says that brown people are replacing good white Americans here in this country. Let's not remember that this country first belonged to brown Native American people.
They chose this woman. I don't know why they chose her specifically, but they chose an African-American woman. And they had a choice between an African-American woman or a Jewish woman because they're trying to paint Kennedy as a racist, which is just ridiculous. And he slays them. Like, he's going to slay all these arguments, right? And they're trying to lump us all in together with Cubies. And, they've done this all along. That everything that's disinformation, that's anti-big science, anti-big pharma, anti-whatever, everything that's, deplatformable on the internet, or when you're in this category as a so-called conspiracy theorist, you're a racist, you're an anti-Semite, you're all these things, right? even though Kennedy's a liberal Democrat, that they know this guy, right? And so she does a lot of race baiting here, and it gets pretty pathetic.
It's a rallying cry for bigotry and hate. There are members of the Republican conference who also frequently suggest that Americans have to deal with COVID rules as the same as oppression of Nazi Germany. Indeed, some have even questioned whether the Holocaust took place. We have staffers who openly follow white supremacy without any condemnation of the Republican conference. Some give it chuckles, slaps on the back, shrugs, all under the mantra of free speech. It's a free country. You absolutely have a right to say what you believe. But you don't have the right to a platform, public or private. We don't have to give one of the largest platforms of our democracy, Congress, this hearing. Our right does not mean that we as Americans are not free from accountability.
Okay, so it's a little bit discombobulated here because when I turned on this, YouTube recommended this thing, and they recommended it under the term that Kennedy testifies, right? Because I've been looking at Kennedy videos, so that's weird. Or, that he's the star of the show. And the stuff that she's saying is just so despicable. And I'm going to get into Debbie Wasserman Schultz, too, as well. Because they're using Kennedy's one remark as a way to, she's going to talk about Kennedy in a second, create a false profile that they all know is false. And they're talking about this being about racism and prejudice. And then she's going to talk about QAnon and some other stuff here. Like, I was looking for the part that I came into, then I found this part. And so they're a little bit, you'll see as I try to edit this thing together here. But she does this in two different sections. And their narrative, and the other people here testifying as Democrats or asking questions or making statements, they're doing the same thing. But none of what they're talking about is anything to do with the issues of deplatforming and censoring people and the government being involved, which they all know is wrong. And they would be really upset if Trump was doing that, if Trump had done that when he was president, and the Republican Party had done that, and they were in power. And they would be, outraged, far worse, and they would bring in these same claims. And so it's just despicable in the sense that they know they've been caught, they know they're wrong, and they're just making excuses and, bad arguments and using victim consciousness and rolling out false, slanderous claims, as Kennedy's going to say. But let's get back into it here.
And that's what's distressing about this hearing. Even knowing what they know about Mr. Kennedy's hateful, evidence-free rhetoric, and even though they've invited any number of witnesses to make their point, Speaker McCarthy, Chairman Jordan affirmatively chose to give this a platform. They intentionally chose to elevate this rhetoric to give these harmful, dangerous views a platform in the halls of the United States Congress. That's endorsing that speech. That's not just supporting free speech. They have co-signed on idiotic, bigoted messaging. It's a conscious choice.
Okay, so I want to get into this when Debbie Wasserman Schultz does her own little victim consciousness thing here as well. Because these were the two groups that supposedly Kennedy slandered, even though he didn't. I want to show you the Kennedy thing, and I'm going to come back and talk about how they're hurting their own demographics in the same way that Sound of Freedom does, which I said the same kind of thing for that. Which, it's just hard to listen to. She gets into the truther stuff here.
To do with the cost of living. What does this have to do with the everyday lives of Americans, the thing that the Republican Party said that they would focus on if they had control of the House? Why would the Republican leadership and the committee majority give a hearing and a platform to the witnesses today, specifically to Mr. Kennedy, a man who has recently claimed that COVID-19 is targeted to attack Caucasians and Black people? The people who are most immune are Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese, And before that, in his film, Medical Racism, The New Apartheid, that film stated that COVID-19 vaccines do not work for Black children because of their, quote, kick-ass kind of immune system, that hyper, superhuman, subhuman kind of language. He also said,
she's going to explain her hyperhuman, subhuman narrative. This is a term she's going to ask one of the witnesses for these guys, the Democrats. The good thing about this, listening to her and a few of the other Democrats here, and I didn't watch the whole thing, but their whole tenor and tone is that it's okay to censor. And the people who are being censored are horrible people and evil, and therefore they get the right to censor. I mean, that's what they're saying, and specifically Kennedy here. You know, I often talk about how if you are against a behavior, you're against it in all forms. And these are the same kind of behaviors that the left has been whining about for years. That's why the left and the liberals and the boomer hippies and all these people that were against abuse, but now they have the power and they've turned into what they hate. And I'll get more into that when Debbie Wasserman Schultz makes a fool of herself.
even in Hitler's Germany, you could cross the Alps to Switzerland. You could hide in an attic like Anne Frank did, to imply Jews in Nazi Germany had more freedoms than unvaccinated Americans during the COVID-19.
Any way to make yourself a victim, or make the people that you supposedly represent a victim, and make the people who have been wronged by censorship evil, right?
Pandemic. Now, many of my Republican colleagues across the dais will rush to cover that they have Mr. Kennedy here because they want to protect his free speech, that they do not believe in American censorship. These folks have a plan. They want to force social media companies to promote conspiracy theories because they think that's the only way their candidate can win the 2024 election.
So this is just blatant lying. This is just out and out, straight up lying. Because the Republicans and the truthers and all of us didn't have to force social media to let so-called conspiracy theories on their platforms. We all know this because they used to allow it because it was better for them. And they resisted censorship, not because they're good people or they're for free speech, because it's better for their business model. Their business model is to have as much information, as many people posting as much as possible, and have as many people as possible viewing what they put up there. In fact, there was a documentary made, I believe, by Netflix that talked about this idea of the algorithms feeding these conspiracy theories to people who wanted them. This is a pro-liberal, documentary or whatever, that they were feeding people all this stuff on Facebook and these other platforms because they want people to be engaged with their app as much as possible. They want as much user time, and we all know that. That's how their business model works. They want to gather as much information. They want you to see as many of their ads, whatever it is, right? And so there is a huge following amongst people in terms of conspiracy theory videos, truther videos. It's well over 30% of the people watch some of them, and they enjoy watching them. Even if they don't believe in them, there's people who watch them. And so social media was resistant to censoring. They were pressured into censoring, first by the ad apocalypse that happened. Remember when that happened with that event that happened in England, and then they pressured, all these companies withdrew their ads from YouTube, McDonald's, and all these AT&T, all these companies like that. And then they were pressured by obviously Biden and the Biden team, but mainstream media, and then the intelligence community as well, and other corporations. And so reluctantly they started to censor, but it's been devastating for them. Their viewership has gone down. Now there's more platforms available, and they have less and less business. And so for her to say that the Republicans and everyone wants these platforms, to force these platforms to put conspiracy theories on their platforms, is just ridiculous, right? They're the ones who are pressuring the platforms to censor people. And that means that they can't win, which we know, if the information gets out on social media. And that's why they were able to deflate this Hunter Biden story, which has nothing to do with racism or anything else. It's just flat out collusion. You know, the FBI and the government and the Biden administration and mainstream media colluded with social media to prevent this story from coming out. And that's a conspiracy and collusion and censorship and a violation of the First Amendment rights. So she's just out and out lying here. She's accusing the Republicans of doing what she and the Democrats are doing.
They want to bully the experts into abandoning their work on disinformation to pave the way. They want to give expression to the most vile sorts of speech here in this committee room because it prepares the ground for their own conspiracy theories and pseudoscience. And they apparently don't care how many people are hurt or die as a consequence of their actions.
So the bullies here are Big Pharma. This is what, right? They are one of the number one lobbying groups that, you know, they owned the Republicans as well as the Democrats. And so Big Pharma and then, you know, all these other groups that are out there, big corporations, big money, that are pushing for censorship. And, you know, there's no one out there. We don't have a lobbying group. The truth community doesn't have a lobbying group. We're not organized enough. We don't get along well enough to boycott or do anything, right? And so there's only one side that's bullying, and that's the side with the power. And she's on that side, right?
Either through lies about vaccines or threats to the safety of witnesses, because nothing is more important to them than power. It's a free country. Both Chairman Jordan and Mr. Kennedy are free to say whatever they want. It's the chairman's right to promote any of the views he wants.
Addressing the power statement, they want control because with no censorship at all, and, you know, things that are legal, sure, things that are really dangerous, sure, people promoting violence, things like that. Real violence, not, you know, imaginary violence, imaginary bullying, imaginary anti-Semitism, imaginary racism, but people just expressing their opinions and criticizing people regardless of their, you know, demographics, you know, real criticism. You know, all these things should be allowed. They're the ones who are trying to censor that, which means they know that if the truth comes out, they're done. Like, you know, that's the only explanation, right? You know, they're bonus holes, right? Stop being such a bonus hole.
Ideals that he has accountable for those that are such as white supremacy, such as election deniers, such as inciters, and those who engaged in the riots of January 6th. Truth be told, I have no idea whether the chairman actually believes any of the stuff. I don't. It's not a question.
I don't know. I don't know if he believes. I don't know. Does he believe? Do you believe in this? I don't know. I could. Right. And so, you know, it's already out there that they knew about. I mean, it was in this committee hearing. They talked about how the FBI let media know that the Hunter Biden story was real 11 months before the election. And so that was election censorship. That was election fixing and rigging. And had that story gotten out, Joe Biden would have no chance of being the president. And so the outrage that people felt is real because the election was gamed and rigged.
I've asked him, or one that's necessarily even important. But it's clear that one aim of his investigation is to bully tech and media companies into turning a blind eye to right-wing extremist conspiracies, from QAnon to the Great Replacement theory, as they spread across their platforms, even when those theories violate very basic terms of service about deliberate disinformation and promoting violence.
So you got absolutely nothing, right? Like, you got zip, you got zero. This is what you're rolling out. You got nothing. Like, this is an absolute joke, right? The fact that they're linking all the people who have been censored and who, you know, put out, like, people who are like myself who used alternative medicine to heal from COVID. And if I posted what I did, they would give me a community guideline strike. That isn't racism. That doesn't make me a QAnon believer. That doesn't make me any of the things that she accused. Like they're saying that they're just deplatforming and censoring people who are violent, who are, crazy. And even the QAnon things, most of those posts that they had are harmless. They're just words. We have the country that's the number one in military spending for, 50 years. How many years has this been? We spend more money in the past, 50, 40 years since I don't even know how long it's been. It's over 60% of our budget is weapons in the military industrial complex. And we've not only engaged in illegal wars and illegal bombings and regime change and doing all kinds of damage where people have suffered all over the world, but we're giving away these weapons. We're giving these weapons to the Ukraine right now, the cluster bombs that's going to hurt children and destroy, just kill people and do bad things, right? These are weapons of mass destruction, things that Jen Psaki called a war crime to use them. And Biden droned 8 kids. And these are real actions. What they're saying is words are worse than that your beliefs are worse than the harm America has done to the world and to the people in it. Your words are so hurtful. That's all they got. You got nothing, right? Like how bad you are as a government, how bad you are a shill for Big Pharma. Big Pharma has done so much pain and, caused so much pain and things. All the side effects, the opioid epidemic, all these other things. Just an absolute, embarrassment. You're an embarrassment. This is what you got. This is all you got.
Across their platforms, even when those theories violate very basic terms of service about deliberate disinformation and promoting violence. Let's not even think about what happens in 2024 with Russian trolls, Iran, China trying to interfere in our elections.
Okay, so this has been totally debunked because Hillary Clinton had a 2-to-1 cash advantage. She has twice as much money as Trump. She had all the networks in her hip pocket. Trump only was never really liked over at Fox. And she had all the mainstream media behind her. And, there was this joint report put out by the NSA, the CIA, and the FBI saying that the election was rigged by the crappy and not popular Russia Today YouTube channel, which was so insignificant. And the people who watched that channel were no way going to vote for Hillary. And so it's just a joke, right? They said the hacking, which the DNC got hacked with Debbie Wasserman Schultz because they suck, not because, whatever they were hacked by. And then all these other things that came out. It didn't have anything to do with the outcome of the election. The Russians might have tried to meddle, but their meddling was so insignificant compared to the rigging that went on and the out-and-out censorship of social media that happened during the Biden and Trump 2020 election. And so, it's just an embarrassment, right? Like you're just blatantly lying and rearranging reality and claiming to be a victim when you're the bully, when you're you're a part of the oppressive, the regime, right? The empire. You're part of the evil empire.
And the bullying extends far beyond tech companies. Witness after witness have testified to the treatment they received from Chairman Jordan and his team. One of our earliest witnesses, Nina Jankovic, told the committee about receiving thousands of death threats and being.
The victim consciousness here is off the charts. This woman's a real energy drain. I have one more section from her. This is what I heard when I originally turned on this video. It was already, about a third of the way through, or an hour into it or so. And she comes back on, and then she gets specific about Kennedy, and then Kennedy rips her a new one, and then I'm going to go to Kennedy's initial, whatever you call it, his opening statement. And then I'm going to wrap this thing up here.
And just so troubled by colleagues that I have to work with, that these are individuals who would bring a witness who's promoted a video that compared the COVID vaccine to the Tuskegee trials. The Tuskegee trials were a very difficult time in Black America, where individuals who were already sick with the disease were then reviewed, experimented on, who already had a disease, to see how far that disease went. And making the comparison that manipulates and preys on Black people's feelings about the atrocities of the past in order to prevent them from seeking life-saving vaccines in the present. And knowing that this is dangerous, I cannot also be unaware that this comes from an individual who, by Mr. Roy's introduction, is very smart and understands the implications of this. You know, Mr. Kennedy's own family decries his stance on vaccines, and families disagree on a lot of things. I got family members that...
Okay, so let's get into Kennedy's stuff here. First, I'm going to show you a brief part of his opening statement where he, well, I'll do that later. I guess I was going to put that in the beginning, but I forgot to do that. But I'll go through that later. I'll go through the whole opening statement. So let's get to the rebuttal here.
You know, we all disagree, so that doesn't mean anything. But the fact that he has famously sent a request to a party guest that they had to be vaccinated to come to his party.
So here's the article here. RFK Jr. says wife Cheryl Hines, not him, urged party guests to be vaxxed for COVID. Now, this isn't great for us. Like, we're not psyched to hear these things from him. But it says anti-vaxxer Robert Kennedy Jr. took a jab at media reports that guests at his holiday party had to show proof they were vaccinated. The Kennedy sign claimed he didn't know his wife, actress Cheryl Hines, had requested in a digital invitation that all guests at the party he held at the couple's California home be fully vaccinated against COVID-19 or test negative for the coronavirus before attending. I guess I'm not always the boss at my own house, he said. He said that adding that there was no effort made to actually verify the vaccination status or testing results of any guests. Hines, known for her role in Curb the Enthusiasm, declined outlets' request for comment. Now, this isn't great for us, like I said. And Kennedy's going to say things that, you know, he's been vaccinated. The only one he hasn't taken is the COVID-19. And so him and his wife have different opinions on this. She's a Hollywood insider, which, you know, nobody wants to see that in the truth community. These are reasons why people in the truth community are going to be against Kennedy. And like I said, you're never going to find anybody who could legitimately have a chance at winning, and I don't know if Kennedy even has that would be as much of a truther as you would like. And that person would find it almost impossible, or would find it impossible to get anything done, because they would be at war with he might have beliefs that he can't talk about, because you guys know how it is, right? A full truther president would be under attack at all time. And, you know, you see how bad it is for Trump, and it'd be much worse than what's happening with Trump. But anyways, let's get back to it here. I just want to add here that this woman could have verified this, right? So she's saying that he demanded people be vaxxed. She's calling him a hypocrite. What she's saying here is that he doesn't want black people to get vaxxed, but he's taking the vax himself. That he's really pro-vax, but he's taken an anti-vax stance. That's what she's going to say here. And he somehow wants to commit genocide against black people. And, you know, that's ridiculous. He's going to destroy that argument. But that's how low she and the Democrats are willing to sink, right?
And I'd like to introduce into the record a letter from Louis Silkin, a law firm representing Mr. Kennedy, which states, as he has stated repeatedly, he vaccinated all his children, and I'd like that to be introduced into the record, but tells the black community and myself a mother of 5 Black children, that I should really be careful and not necessarily have the same safeguards to protect my family, my children, from a virus that has killed millions of people because I'm Black. There's no secret that this is an amplification of his own platform. You know, I'm not going to talk about the money that's received from the Children's Health Defense, from his anti-vaccine organization that's responsible for a majority of the false information out there about COVID, and the notoriety that's gained from it by manipulating Black and other vulnerable communities to propagate these pseudosciences. Ms. Wiley, are you aware of the phrase superhuman yet subhumanization?
I can't say I'm aware of the phrase. I am aware of the viewpoint.
And can you share what you believe that to mean when it comes to Black people?
Well, sadly and unfortunately, we have a history in this country where Black people were both by law and by social view viewed as inferior and subhuman, and that there were stereotypes attached to that that includes all kinds of myth about the ability to disregard both the health needs, health conditions, and disparities that exist for Black people and in Black communities, to the detriment not only of the health of people who are Black, but also to public health by not taking good, sound
Yes, that, you know,
decisions.
in chattel slavery, you don't have to feed them the same way because they can take it. They can handle that.
So they're trying to lay this on Kennedy. She's trying to say this is Kennedy. So here's Kennedy's rebuttal.
Wow, the irony and cognitive dissonance from the other side of the aisle. It's deafening. You could cut it with a knife. They are at the same time denying that censorship is occurring, but suggesting that there's more material that needs to be censored. This is a hearing on censorship that began with an effort, with a formal motion from the other side of the aisle to censor Mr. Kennedy. They do not want him to speak, yet that is the topic of this hearing. They have kept him from speaking. A collusion between the government and private organizations. Mr. Kennedy, in your opening statement, you introduced us to this word malinformation. Can you tell us more about this made-up word, what it means, and some of the things that you've said or tried to say that you've been censored for that's been characterized as malinformation?
Okay, so that was the introduction. That guy's kind of funny and kind of great. But let's see the Kennedy rebuttal. I'm not going to show you the Kennedy opening statement. This video is already at an hour and 30 minutes. I don't know how we could sit through this, although I've sat through it a number of times already. But here's Kennedy.
Yes, Congressman Massey, and if by your leave, I'd like to just respond very briefly to some of the, what I would call defamations that have been just applied to me by the ranking member. I'm happy to talk to you about my opinions on these issues, what you have stated and tried to associate me with through guilt by association is simply inaccurate. Virtually everything, every statement that you just made about me is inaccurate. I have never advised Black Americans not to receive vaccines. At one point you say I'm anti-vax, and that's a bad thing. The other moment you point out that all my children are vaxxed. I'm fully compliant with the vaccine schedule myself, except for COVID. I took flu vaccines for 20 years straight. I have never been anti-vax. I have never told the public avoid vaccination. The only thing I've asked for, and my views are constantly misrepresented, so that the truth of what I believe is not, we're not allowed to have a conversation about that with the American people, which I believe vaccines should be tested with the same rigor as other medicines and medications. You tried to associate me a moment ago with the replacement theory, which is racist.
No, I did not say you
Time
had the
belongs to the
replacement
gentleman
theory.
from
I
the
said my
second.
colleagues
The time
do.
belongs to the gentleman from
I
Kentucky.
denounce that theory. It is racist and I have never endorsed it or had any association with it. Our film on a medical, by the way,
medical apartheid?
Bill Buxton, who is the black CDC official who ultimately exposed the Tuskegee experiment, tried for years and years to appeal to CDC to stop it for 40 years. Finally, he got relief by walking into my uncle's office in the building next door. Teddy held hearings and ended the experiment. I remember that very well. And to say that I created a film that encourages blacks not to get adequate medical care is just completely abhorrent.
Don't misuse my words.
It's the witness's time. Do not censor the witness.
I'm not censoring the witness. I'm not censoring the witness. He's still talking.
It's my time, and I've given it to the witness. Do not censor him.
I'm not censoring him.
If the views that you and others have applied to me, have attributed to me, if they were actually true, I can see why I shouldn't be able to testify here today. Those are not true. These are defamations and malignancies that are used to censor me, to prevent people from listening to the actual things that I'm saying. And I think, ranking member, that we should have a real conversation rather than an exchange of ad hominem attacks. And answer very quickly to your question, the term malinformation was coined to describe information that Facebook and Twitter and the other social media sites understood was true, but that the White House and other federal agencies wanted censored anyway for political reasons because it challenged official orthodoxies. I'll give you one example. I was included in a group called the Disinformation Dozen. And Facebook and others were asked to censor us, which they did. And by the way, my Hank Aaron post, it was taken down. My whole Instagram account with 900,000 people was taken down because of that. Oh, they knew, Facebook knew that the Disinformation Dozen claim, and what they said was the Disinformation Dozen came from this very shady group called the Center for Preventing Digital Hate in England that's funded by dark money, that should be looked into. They claim that 65% of the vaccine misinformation on the internet was generated by those 12 people. Facebook itself said that is impossible. That is false information. We know that not to be true. And yet, when the White House asked them to censor this Disinformation Dozen, including me, they did it anyway when they knew it to be untrue.
My time has expired. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent motion before. I would like to introduce.
The Democrats have become a party of clowns. Now, what I was going to show you was Kennedy's introduction. I'm kind of worn out here. It's already getting around dinner time. I got other things to do. It's been a long sort of rule through this thing because I've watched it like 3 times now. So I'll cover that at the beginning of the next video. I definitely want to get to the Fran Drescher thing before it becomes a non-story. And I got a bunch of other things, kind of funny stuff. But what Debbie Wasserman Schultz did, and I saw her earlier on, and, you know, I comment about her just looking like a complete ghoul and what a failure she was as the DNC head. And I'll get into all that more when she does what she does. But Kennedy just rips apart this idea that he's a racist and an anti-Semitic person in the opening of the, of the hearing. And right afterward, Debbie Wasserman Schultz breaks into the, she just breaks into whatever the flow of the thing is. And she's such a ghoul. I mean, she's so, she's been such a failure. She so sucks so bad. And she tries to censor the guy and have a vote that he shouldn't be allowed to testify for his hateful and dangerous remarks. And that's a joke. Like, everyone who is not a liberal Democrat, who hasn't drunk the Kool-Aid, knows it's an absolute joke. Because what he said about the vax was that it could be genetically targeting because the technology exists. And if you look at the data, which is, data that I found, and he might even have better data, that there are some genetic groups that are less affected and some genetic groups that are more affected. But what happened was that Stacy, whatever her name is, from the Virgin Islands, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz were both, one's a black woman, one's a Jewish woman. And they're claiming he's racist and anti-Semitic. So that's the way they were going to attack this thing. Because they can't defend their actions. They can't admit that they suck and they've been censoring, that they rigged the election and they affected the outcomes of things. And Joe Biden being elected was a sham, all these things because of the Hunter Biden stuff and then the stuff with Kennedy when these people aren't a danger and they're being censored and they're being pressured to be censored. And this is a violation of the First Amendment and other things, right? So this is really bad on so many levels, and nothing's going to happen. And so their attack was to call him a racist for one comment he made like last week. And nobody really thinks that. He says that in the beginning. He knows the people who signed the letter because he's a Democrat and they're Democrats. And they all just made this up. And when you're a black person or a Jewish person and you're bringing false charges and you're slandering somebody these are some of the worst things you can say about somebody, that they're racist and anti-Semitic. And that's not true. And he goes into his whole history and his family's history and his relationships and things that he's done and litigated. And, he's not a racist. He's not anti-Semitic. Everyone knows it, right? And when you do that, like I was saying to all the right-wing Republicans with this sanctimonious, Sound of Freedom movie, it hurts your cause. It hurts real racism and real anti-Semitic stuff. It hurts when people make claims and they don't believe it anymore. Like when Jussie Smollett faked a hate crime. That's what they're doing up there. To slander Kennedy, who is a much better candidate when they got a guy who's mentally, falling apart. And all these guys are taking money from the pharmaceutical companies, right? And they're completely compromised. And so the whole thing is an absolute sham. And they're embarrassing. They're embarrassing themselves and they're, making false claims and false accusations that anybody can see through. Anybody with a pulse. But anyways, I got to wrap this up. So I'll get back into it. I'll cover it a little bit more. Very interesting. I still haven't, there's a part where Debbie Wasserman Schultz gets ripped apart by Kennedy. At least there's a video entitled that. I didn't get to watch that yet. I'm not going to watch it today. And so I got my Hollywood celebrities dropping like flies tomorrow, and then I'll cover this again, hopefully, on Saturday, and, we'll go from there. If not, I'll get to it on Sunday or whenever, because there's gathering. There's a whole thing. So I'm a little bit, there's a lot going on here. So only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing to the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.